Hey, kia ora and welcome. We'll make a start. There may be some other people joining us online, but this recording will be made available for people who want to view it later. So kia ora and welcome. My name's Eddie Winter. I'm Senior Policy Advisor with Taumataarowai. Joining me today is Ed Young, our Senior Technical Advisor. Our apologies from Bella Whittle, who couldn't join us today due to obviously circumstances. So the purpose of today is another drop-in session to give an opportunity for network operators to familiarise themselves with the requirements for the reporting, and more of an opportunity for you to ask any questions of Ed and myself on the actual reporting. Without further ado, we'll kick things off. So to start us for this meeting, to ensure that we're all working together with mutual respect and endeavouring to learn and discuss matters for this topic. Karakia timatanga, ki horo ti marino, kia whakapapa punamo ti moana, hei hurahai mā tātou I te rangi nei, aroha ato, aroha mai, tātou I tātou katoa, humie, huie, tākie. So thank you for joining us today. Some of you may have seen our previous presentations where we went into the need for the Network Environmental Performance Report, which we publish on an annual basis. So for the data for 2023-24 is due to us by the end of September. The way to do this is to go to our website, download and complete the template. It's an Excel spreadsheet which you can complete, get any appropriate sign-off within your organisation, as you're reporting this on behalf of your organisation. And then once you've completed it, please submit one template for your organisation to us. We do reiterate this point because if you send in multiple versions, our system absorbs the latest version. So if you send an updated version, we will always be using the latest version. But if two people send in data, one will overwrite the other. So please collate your data together and send in one version per organisation. You can contact us for any questions, or when you have completed your template, please send it to email at measures@taumataarowai.govt.nz, and we'll send you a reply. And like last year, we may come back to you after we've received it if there are any questions or some of the data needs verification. Just to very quickly go over the spreadsheet, it's a single spreadsheet this year which covers both drinking water and wastewater. It looks at details both at an organisational level, network, and resource consent level. So there's a separate page throughout the spreadsheet for that. So I should have said at the beginning of this webinar is being recorded and it will be made available on our website, as will the presentation. But if you've got any questions throughout the webinar, use the Q&A function or chat function, type your questions at the bottom there, and we're going to very quickly go through this, and then we'll give an opportunity for you to ask any questions by entering them in the chat function at the bottom. So this is really today's purpose, is giving an opportunity for you to ask more specific questions about any of the specific measures or any questions you have, or in general. So it's an opportunity for you to ask questions of Ed and myself. Also, there's an opportunity for us to capture either best practices or any of the issues which you may have encountered over the last year. Tell us about it. It's not just about the numbers, it's about the narrative and the story that goes around those. So if you've got any extenuating circumstances or issues or any successes, here's an opportunity to report on those, and then we can showcase them to the rest of the sector. The main purpose of this is to provide and share information both for the sector and the public, so we can sort of showcase some of those examples and challenges, so we're aware of the pressures on the sector. There are a number of resources. These are all available on our webpage. If you go to taumataarowai and measures, there is actually a video, watch this space, coming very soon, which is a video tutorial. So rather than just listening to myself, there is a video which will be available on the website. This goes through all of the things on the page there. So we've got a guidance document, a summary of that guide, if you just want to skip straight to the measures as a summary, although the guide gives full detailed definitions. It's all available on our webpage, and you can contact us at any point through that measures@taumataarowai.govt.nz email address. Just to get the questions started, I know we've had some questions previously. And these are a few more questions we've had recently. I'll just talk through a couple of these questions. They may be of interest to you. So we asked for data about resource consent. One of the questions we've been asked is, why don't we just go and get this from regional councils? Well, all network operators should have their own resource consents. And the key thing there is it's your resource consent. You should be aware of the requirements, limitations, expiry date, or any conditions. So that's the operator's resource consent. Regional councils just issue them, but the operators hold the resource consents and should be aware of those. We ask a few questions about emergency response and emergency preparedness. If you had a response, an actual response, does that count as an exercise? Yes, it does. It's a bit like having a fire drill. We have fire drills. If we had a real fire, we would count that as an exercise. So likewise, an emergency response itself counts as an exercise. A few questions about residential water consumption. We understand that in some cases, this can be quite difficult to separate residential from non-residential, where particularly in rural areas, we may have areas where you may not be able to have sub-metering to differentiate between residential use and pastoral or agricultural use. So we understand there may be sort of mixed use in some of those areas. Try to make a best estimate with a number of the measures. The better the information you can provide with a qualifier around that, the better we can understand that. So if we do see a high water usage, but you flag that it's for mixed use, it's also used for agricultural usage, and you've put this in the comments field, that tells us much more of a picture than the average water use was 2,000 litres per house per day, which seems quite high to us. So please provide any kind of context, any comments in those comments boxes, just around some of those figures that may seem a little bit outside of the norm. If it's widely outside of the expected range, you may get an error message. So if you type a figure in, you may have used the wrong units. So just to reiterate, the units are included. And then when you put the result there, check that you're measuring in kilometers rather than meters, or thousands of dollars rather than dollars, because there are some times where people have put figures in which are much larger than we would expect. Double check your units. If it's still widely outside it, put them in the comments. Feel free to contact us. We have ways to resolve this if it's a genuine circumstances. But those expected ranges are put there to try and mask and get the kind of expected data. Had a few questions about how do you count or calculate the number of connections in a network. So most of you would have calculated or estimated the population when you registered different networks on Hinakarako. So it's using the same tools that you would use if you've said we estimate the population of this network is X. You would have had a methodology for that. There are a few different methods available on our website. We would say we'll use the same figures or the same methodology as you would use for Hinakarako for your drinking water and wastewater. And there are some Q&As and guidance on things like multi-unit buildings and multi-unit complexes. And we understand it can be one source to many connections. So again, refer to the guide. If in doubt, either contact us or pop something in the comments just to explain where some of those figures may seem a little unusual. I'm going to stop the presentation there because today is much more about an opportunity for you guys to ask questions of us. So I'm just going to stop sharing that screen and check the Q&A, and there's a couple of people typing in the chat function there. So that was really just a bit of a kind of a preempt. Feel free, I can see a couple of people typing there to throw your comments, thoughts, questions in the chat function. And again, some of these may be very specific. We may be able to answer them today, or we may need to go away and check the guide. So I've got a question here about some of the wastewater and drinking water measures for the number of pump stations. So I'm just going to read the question and then I'll just summarize it and repeat it back to you. And Ed, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on this. Feel free to weigh in on this, particularly where we're talking about condition ratings for assets.
Yes. So You were asking about, we only have component condition ratings. Which types of assets should be included in the measure, i.e. structural, like shed, civil assets, like pump chambers, non-electrical, mechanical? It's actually everything. So it's, I know it's a very generic measure right now because it hasn't gotten broken down into specific components of an asset management or asset condition assessment, because usually when you do one, it's like there's one for buildings and there's for mechanical, electrical, then all that sort of stuff. But there's kind of an average of all of it together, so that we kind of have a holistic idea of what condition the entire asset is, as in like a pump station, a treatment plant. So that's the kind of idea that we're trying to go for. I know it's a little funny to calculate, but it's very high level right now.
Yeah, and I think in the guide talks about, I think there's an international sort of standard that looks at ways of asset management and planning and how you do those condition assessments. So that may be a
Yeah,
little bit more.
the individual asset condition grading of the components doesn't need to be considered. It's just how much it totalizes into the whole thing. So if you have, like, say, one analyzer that you have as is a low condition, but the rest of the plant is fine, you wouldn't include that because your plant is pretty much fine, unless it's like a compliance monitoring thing, so it has some sort of issues that would affect the condition of the asset and its performance. Then that would probably be good to kind of make some highlights about it. But majorly, it is the like how a council sees an asset, as in like this is just a pump station. What's its condition?
So the overall asset condition,
Yeah.
notwithstanding, there are some critical assets. So yes, if you would say the overall condition of the asset, but there are some critical assets. I think there the individual condition grading of the components doesn't need to be considered. It is taking a holistic picture. But if
Yeah,
you
and
do have critical components, those are the ones that you really obviously need to focus that asset management on.
mhm. And if you want to just write a comment about it saying, this condition of the site is this, but there are these critical components that might be a little bit less in
Yep.
condition.
All right.
Next one.
2 bores with 1 flow meter.
Yeah, you still have two abstraction points because they're two separate bores. Unless, yeah, that's just how it is. Even if you have one flow meter reading for both of them, I'm assuming, I don't know if it's a flip-flop operation or if you're taking them both at the same time, but you, that's a little bit tricky to calculate, but it is two different abstraction points, I believe.
Yeah, without knowing the configuration, is it a wide piece? Is it a, as you say, flip flop either or both of them coming through a single point? Um, Again, how would your resource consent? Because of course you've got to have instantaneous flow as part of the consent for that abstraction point. Pop it in the comments with a wee bit of an explanation if this is across 2 abstraction points. Another question here, are these measures based on the previous Water New Zealand NPR, National Performance Review? Yes. A lot of the work we did is based on the back of international standards and practices, and we did take a lot of this from the old NPR that Water New Zealand have been running since 2007. They've been working with, I think, 85% of councils up and down the country on a voluntary basis, and a lot of that we've taken across. So some of these are based on that. Is it likely these measures will continue? So yes, the intent here is that from 2022, 23, 24, we will be introducing these measures. There's a little bit of a kind of a growing curve, both with the sector and with us. Obviously, there are more measures being reported this year, so the measures you reported last year are being complemented and supplemented with a few more measures this year. In the future, we may consider other measures such as stormwater. I know Water New Zealand used to report on stormwater, so there may potentially be measures, but these will feed into our annual report. So every year we will be seeking this data and providing an annual report, both for the sector and the public. So
Yeah,
yes, in terms of setting up automated processes, absolutely.
yeah, also, if we were going to make any changes to the measures, we would have to go out for public consultation.
Yes.
So you would get a lot of advance notice if there was anything going to change.
Absolutely. Public consultation, well, there'll be pre-engagement, consultation, and then a suitable lead-in period. So, for instance, the wastewater measures that we've introduced now were consulted on in October 22. So we always like to give the sector an indication of if there is anything new likely to be on the horizon, give you an opportunity for your input, and then a suitable lead-in period so you can set up any processes in place or refine any processes. For some people, this is, I say, a lot of councils have been reporting on this since 2007 through Water NZ. Some it's a little bit new to them, so we acknowledge that. Okay, there's a couple of people typing in the chat function. We'll just give people another couple of minutes to pop any questions in there. But again, I'll remind people there's always an opportunity to contact us at Taumataarowai. I monitor that email box. I think a lot of you have contacted me previously there, or you got my phone number, so feel free at any point just to fire away any questions. I will always say questions are good. Don't wait till the 29th of September. Obviously, we do want to get data in from everyone in a timely manner. A couple of people typing away, so zeros. I'll talk a little bit about zeros, blanks, and O's. If you generally don't have any data, please leave it blank. If it is a zero, if you put a zero in, the database will actually read it as a zero. I know with Excel, it tends to display it in two different ways. Sometimes it's a blank empty cell, and sometimes it's just a line. Sometimes it's a zero. They're all read the same way as our database. It's just a formatting thing within Excel. But again, to please reiterate, don't just put a zero in to fill a cell in. If it genuinely is a zero, what it does is when we do a statistical analysis, it adds a whole load of zeros, which just messes up the distribution curve. But yeah, enter the data as it is, and the system will ingest that data. A couple more people typing. Feel free, we've still got another 10 minutes if people have got any other questions. Lessons learned. That's a good one. That's a very good point. To my mind, there's probably a couple of lessons learned from this, both in terms of our understanding from the sector, how the reporting process is working and the template is working. The template has been revised this year based on a lot of feedback from people. But will there be a lessons learned where we can share some of this with the sector? For instance, how do we measure leakage? Everyone measures leakage possibly in a slightly different way. If there's an interest within the sector, we could set up some discussion forums. So there probably are key topics. We know leakage is a hot topic in the sector and in the media. That's definitely something. If there is topics of interest, we can, rather than setting up as a webinar like this, we can probably set up a slightly different format. If people are interested, we've got one person who is. If there's anyone else, thumbs up or contact us. That's definitely something we can look to do as we grow, both as an organisation and as a sector. The water services sector would like to do more of those kind of lessons learned and discuss and share the knowledge of how to capture information. Somebody may have a great, unique way of novel way of doing something, such as how you measure leakage, how you report it, how you capture data. So yeah. Anything you wanted to add to that, Ed? I just think if there are any other topics that we might want to set up as a kind of a discussion forum.
Water loss was the biggest one.
Mm.
That one
Yep.
had a lot of challenges during the reporting last period. The other ones that I think, pressure management.
Mhm.
That might be a good one too, but they're hand in hand with water
They're
loss.
linked. Yep. So there could be a two-part series.
Yeah, those are the two ones that are pretty challenging data reviews that I did. Oh,
Okay. Okay. We've still got another 5 minutes. There are no more questions coming through in the chat, but you've still got a couple of minutes if people do have any other questions.
I do have one comment. Please enter a confidence, even though if it might be low, it's not a penalty. It is really just trying to understand what is required in the sector right now. If you enter a low confidence, then we can actually use that as a gauge to create more guides, set up webinars, and just try to figure out what topics to discuss and share with the industry. So again, please put a confidence in.
Yep. It gives it gives a realistic sort of gauge of how their sort of knowledge is, and it's interesting looking at other overseas models where they've introduced monitoring. First round, sometimes people are very confident, and then as the regulators have worked with the parties involved, they've said actually we're maybe a little bit over optimistic, and probably we can improve that. So confidence may go down. That doesn't mean that their confidence actually gone down. They're just possibly being a little bit more pragmatic and a little bit less optimistic and more realistic. But it does just give us an idea of if there are areas in the sector where support and training and knowledge sharing is needed.
Yeah, that's really what I'm trying to use confidence as.
Yes.
That is understandable. There's going to be a
Yep.
lot of confidence increases when there's more equipment and other things set up to try to get a better and accurate measurement. So, and that's
Yes.
fine too.
And that's one of the things that understandably some operators may have the equipment and the tools and the processes in place today to report this. Some won't. But is this an area where we're seeing more growth in the kind of asset condition monitoring and management? So there will be more systems and more equipment in place. We know meters are expensive. We know the use and the monitoring of them is time intensive and expensive. But it does help with that systems management and reporting. And so sometimes having this is a tool in your toolkit to justify expenditure.
Again, also there is a comment section, so if you want to make a comment about it, by all means.
And back to your point before, Ed, about pressure management and leak management being so linked. If you know where your leaks are, if you can sort of monitor and measure and control your pressure, you can control your leaks and reduce that. But if you don't know what you're doing because you don't have the tools and the pressure meters and the flow meters, it's hard to do.
Yeah.
Alrighty. We're just about on a half hour, so I'll close this out in a couple of minutes, unless there's any more questions. We're running a series of these throughout August and September. So there's one today, there's one another 2 weeks' time, and there's a couple more in September. So feel free to come along to them, either with or without any questions. We'll bring a few FAQs to each one of these, but we're always here to answer any questions you have on the day or follow up after. So I'll just go back to our presentation. And I'll close this out with a karakia whakamatonga. Unahia, unahia, unahia ki te uru tapu nui, ki wātia, ki māma, tinakau, titina. Ti wairoa I te takata, ko I ara ronga, whakaira ake ki runga, kia tina, uye, tā kie. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope to be in touch very soon.
Thanks, everyone.